Instructor Kale stood on the soft, violet grass of Sylvan Prime and watched the new trainees step off the shuttle. The air smelled of rain and sweet, decaying wood. Kale's homeworld, the planet Vox, had no trees. It had canyons. To Kale, a forest was not a place of shelter. It was a maze of 1,000 hiding spots for 1,000 different kinds of hunger. The Galactic Coalition had sent another mixed-species cohort. Kale saw the slender, large-eyed Telunians, their ears twitching at every new sound. They saw the bulky, scaled Gron, who tried to look brave but kept their tails tucked close. There were others, all from planets with clear, evolved roles, predator or prey. Then there were the humans. 4 of them. They walked with a steady, unremarkable pace. They did not huddle together for comfort like the Telunians, nor did they puff themselves up like the Gron. They just looked. The male, Min, scanned the tree line, his eyes pausing on the way the branches interlocked. The female, Jihyun, watched the Gron's nervous twitching with a calm, studying expression. The other male, Tae-suk, was already fiddling with the wrist comp every trainee was issued. The last female, Su-min, simply stood still, feeling, it seemed, the texture of the alien soil beneath her boot. Kale's internal translator gave their names. It also gave Kale a small, familiar pulse of professional concern. Humans were new to the coalition. Their file was thin. They were described as highly adaptive social omnivores. A vague term. To Kale, an omnivore was just a confused creature that hadn't decided where it stood on the great chain of consumption. "Form a line," Kale said, their voice a modulated hum that the translator made gentle and clear. The trainees scrambled. The humans moved into place without hurry. Kale began the first and most important lesson. All survival, Kale stated, begins with one thing, the correct fear. Fear is not your enemy. It is your oldest, most reliable teacher. Tells you what to run from. Today, you learn the faces of the teachers you must listen to. From a case, Kale produced the first biosignature emitter. It was a small, glossy orb. When activated, it would project not an image, but a feeling, a composite psychic residue of a creature's essential nature, built from countless encounters and sensor logs. "This," Kale said, holding the orb aloft, "is a Gravix. It lives in the asteroid belts of the KRYLL system. It has no eyes. It sees gravity itself, the bends and pulls you make in space. It is silent. It is always above or below you. You will never hear it coming." Kale activated the orb. A wave of sensation washed over the trainees. It was a feeling of profound wrongness, of a sickening lurch in the stomach, a dizzying sense that up was down and the ground was not solid. It was the deep, primal terror of something that could defy the very laws you stood upon. The Telunians whimpered, their ears flattening. One of the Gron took a step back, a low hiss escaping its throat. Other trainees looked away or shut their inner eyelids. Kale watched the humans. Min's eyebrows drew together. He looked interested. Jihyun tilted her head, as if listening to a faint, strange song. Tae-suk's lips moved slightly, as if calculating something. Su-min just stood there, her face a polite blank. No dilated pupils. No spike in heart rate the Kale scanner could detect. No scent of panic chemicals. They registered the sensation, but they did not fear it. Kale marked it as a possible sensory gap. Perhaps human empathy receptors were weak. The next orb was brought out. "The screamer of the Kelvin moons," Kale announced. "It hunts by sound. Your heartbeat is a drum to it. The rustle of your clothing is a shout. It mimics the cries of your loved ones to draw you into the dark." This time, the orb released a psychic pulse of pure, predatory hunger mixed with a piercing, wrong-pitched sound that seemed to vibrate the bones. It was the fear of being tracked by something you could not silence, the terror of your own body betraying your location. The reaction was more pronounced. A Telunian sat down heavily. The Gron bared their teeth in defensive fear. The humans? Min flinched at the initial noise, a physical reaction to a loud sound. Jihyun's shoulders tensed. But the core, paralyzing terror? It didn't land. Tae-suk actually looked at his wrist comp, maybe checking the sound frequency. Sumin blinked, her only concession to the assault. Kale deactivated the orbs. The forest was quiet again, save for the shaky breaths of the other trainees. The humans were already looking around, their moment of mild disturbance over. The first rule, Kale continued, forcing focus back to the lesson. You do not fight these. You do not challenge them. You fear them. That fear will tell you to hide, to mask your scent and your heat, to be silent as stone. That fear will keep you alive. Kale demonstrated the standard issue scent masking spray, the thermal damping cloth. The trainees watched closely. The humans watched closest of all. They did not look like prey learning to hide. They looked like students memorizing a manual for tools they might later use. As the group was shown how to find a safe hollow for the night, Kale overheard a snippet of conversation. The humans were lagging behind, talking softly. Did that first one feel like being on a boat in rough seas to you? Min asked Ji-hyun. A little, she replied. Unpleasant. Not scary. Tae-suk chimed in. The second one's frequency was between 4 and 5 kilohertz. Annoying. Would hurt after a while. Sumin just nodded. Kale felt a flicker of frustration. They were missing the point entirely. The lesson was about the emotion, the instinct, not the technical specifications of the threat. Kale made a note in their personal log. Asterisk human cohort shows deficient threat response to Class 3 and Class 4 psychic predator signatures. Likely a neurological gap. Will emphasize practical evasion techniques. Their survival may depend on overlearning compensatory behaviors. Asterisk. The sun of Sylvan Prime began to set, casting long, strange shadows through the purple leaves. The other trainees jumped at the shapes. The humans looked at them, noted them, and moved on. Kale, for the first time in a long teaching career, felt a subtle disconnect. They were speaking a fundamental language of the universe, and these four beings from a world called Earth seemed to be hearing only the grammar, not the meaning. It was a puzzle, but not yet a worry. Just a gap in understanding. One that, Kale was sure, the harsh lessons of the forest would soon fill. The second day was for silence. Instructor Kale gathered the trainees at the edge of a dense part of the forest. The light was a dim green, filtered through a thick ceiling of leaves. Sounds here were different. They were close and damp. Your first failure will be a sound, Kale said, their voice low. A snapped twig, a rustle of fabric, the catch of your own breath. The predators here do not need to see you. They listen. Kale moved. They demonstrated the Voxian stalk. It was a slow, flowing motion. Every footfall was placed with care, the outside of the foot touching down first, rolling to the inside. It was the walk of a creature that lived in deep canyons, where a single kicked stone could bring a rockslide. Kale became a ghost in the green light. One moment they were by a large, twisted root. The next, they were 3 meters away with no sound in between. The trainees watched, impressed. Even the Gran, who were strong, understood they were not built for this. Now you try, Kale said. From here to that marked tree. Your goal is to be a shadow. The Telunians went first. Their light bodies were an advantage. Their large feet were quiet. They moved quickly with nervous, darting motions. Not perfect, but the instinct was there. Fear made them quiet. The Gran tried. Their heavy steps crunched on the undergrowth. One of them stepped on a dry branch. The crack was like a gunshot in the quiet forest. The Gran flinched, looking around with wide, worried eyes. Kale gave a slow nod. Good. You heard your mistake. Fear that sound. Let it teach you. Then it was the human's turn. Min went first. He did not copy Kale's flowing roll exactly. He paused first, looking at the ground. He saw a path of moss and softer-looking earth. He moved along it. His steps were not the Voxian roll. They were careful, flat-footed placements. He was slow, but he was quiet. He reached the tree. Kale noted it. Practical. He used the land. Ji-hyun was next. She did not look at the ground as much. She looked at the space between the trees. She moved from the trunk of one tree to the next, using them to break up her shape. Her movement was not fearful. It was efficient. She did not try to be a shadow. She tried to be a piece of the forest that was moving. She reached the tree. Tae-suk was thinking too much. Kale could see it. He was trying to calculate the perfect pressure for each step. He moved in a slow, stiff way. He was quiet, but it was the quiet of intense concentration, not instinct. Halfway, a leaf crunched. He froze. His face showed not fear, but annoyance at himself. Then he finished his walk. Sumin was last. She did something the others did not. She stood for a long moment with her eyes closed. She was listening. Then she opened them and moved. Her walk was different. It was a low, balanced stride. She did not avoid all dry leaves. Sometimes she stepped on the very edge of one, where it was still connected to the stem, and it made no sound. She used the natural noise of the forest, a distant bird call, to cover the soft shuffle of her boot. She reached the tree without a single loud sound. Kale was not sure what to think. The humans were not bad at the task, but they were not good in the right way. They were solving a puzzle. They were not learning a survival instinct. The group took a rest period by a small, clear stream. The other trainees drank quietly, their eyes still moving, watching the trees. The humans sat together. Kale moved closer, under the cover of some hanging vines, to listen. Instructors needed to understand their students' minds. Min was chewing on a piece of safe, local grass. "The quiet walk," he said. "It reminds me of something." Jihyun nodded, splashing water on her face. "My grandfather," she said softly. "In the old days in the mountains near Saksho, he hunted wild boar. He would be gone for days. He told me the forest is not empty. It is full. To move through it, you do not fight it. You join it. You become a part of its business. The boar does not fear a tree that shifts in the wind." Tae-suk looked up. "It is about pattern recognition. Your grandfather was not trying to be silent to the boar. He was trying to match the existing audio profile of his environment. He was adding his noise to the baseline." Jihyun shrugged. "Maybe. He just said the loudest thing in the woods should never be you." Sumin spoke for the first time. "We played a game, as children, in the evening. Gujongi." Min smiled a little. "Yes, the hiding and seeking game. But in the dark. In our neighborhood. The one who was it had a flashlight. The goal was to get back to base without being caught in the light." Tae-suk added, "It trained lateral movement, and judging the searcher's cone of vision, and using fixed objects for cover." Jihyun looked at him. "It trained us to be quiet in the dark while our hearts were beating fast, and to not be afraid of the dark, only of the light." Kale listened, the translator working. The words were clear, but the meaning behind them was strange. These were not stories of hiding from monsters. They were stories of practice, of hunting, of games that trained for evasion and pursuit. The core of the stories was not fear. It was a kind of competition. Then Min told another story. "My aunt, Hannah. She lived in a city, Busan. One night, a man broke into her apartment. She was alone. The other humans leaned in slightly. Kale's sensors focused. She did not run," Min said. "She did not hide. She stood up. She turned on all the lights. She looked him directly in the eyes and she shouted. Not a scream of fear. Command. A deep, loud sound from her stomach. She pointed at the door. She told him to get out." "What happened?" Tae-suk asked. "He left," Min said simply. She said his eyes changed. He was looking for a victim. He found a person who was angry, confused him. He left. Kale felt that disconnect again. Deeper now. The Talunian or Gran response to a home invasion would be to freeze, to hide, to flee. The human response in this story was to dominate the situation, to become the more intimidating thing. Kale stepped out from the vines. The humans stopped talking. "Your rest time is over," Kale said, their tone neutral. "The next lesson is on thermal masking. Your body heat is a beacon in the cool night." As Kale demonstrated the reflective cloaks, their mind was working. The humans learned the steps. They asked smart questions about material composition and heat dissipation rates. But Kale's earlier note felt wrong. This was not a neurological gap. This was a cultural one, a deep evolutionary one. They were not processing the threat of predation. They were processing the data of a threat. They were assessing, not reacting. When night fell and the trainees huddled in their thermal cloaks, the other species curled up small, making less of a target. The humans sat with their backs together, facing outward, watching different parts of the dark. They were not hiding from the night. They were keeping watch over it. Kale looked at them from the instructor's perch. The puzzle was becoming more complex. Fear was the engine of survival. But what was the engine for these humans? What made them move, if not the desire to flee? Kale did not have an answer. Not yet. The third morning brought a hard, cold rain. The trainees stood under the shelter of a giant, fan-like leaf, listening to the water drum against it. Instructor Kale felt the weather was a good teacher. Discomfort was a distraction. Distraction got you killed. Today is your first test, Kale announced. The group straightened up. You will use the skills of silence and awareness. You will cross the Silver Gulch, 2 kilometers from here. The terrain is rocky. There are many places for ambush. The Talunians' ears drooped. The Gron shuffled their feet. The humans just listened. But you will not go alone, Kale continued. They held up a small, black device. This is a predator drone. It is programmed with the hunting patterns of a juvenile Gravix. It does not strike to kill. It tags you with a paint charge. If you are tagged, you have failed. The lesson is learned. Kale saw the familiar fear in most of the trainees' eyes. Good. That fear would sharpen their senses. They looked at the humans. Min was studying the drone. Jihyun was looking towards the direction of the gulch, as if judging the distance. Taesuk and Sumin had the calm, waiting posture of people in a queue. The rules are simple, Kale said. Reach the other side of the gulch. Avoid the drone. Use what you have learned. Fear will tell you when to hide. Fear will tell you when to run. Go now. You have 1 hour before the drone is activated. The group moved out into the drizzle. The forest was gray and noisy with rain. The usual small sounds were gone, washed away. The trainees spread out. The instinct of prey was not to stay in a herd, but to break up, to not be an easy target. Kale climbed to a high observation point. Through the rain, they watched on a scanner screen that showed the heat signatures of the trainees and the cold, blue signature of the waiting drone. The clock ticked down. When the drone activated, it moved with a chilling, silent speed. It did not fly in a straight line. It dropped from a tree, then shot along the ground, using rocks and dips for cover. It was a perfect simulation. On the screen, Kale saw the reactions. The Talunian signatures froze, becoming very still and small. The Gron signatures bolted, moving quickly but in straight, panicked lines. One Gron was tagged within minutes. A blue mark flashed on Kale's screen. Then Kale watched the human signatures. They did not freeze. They did not bolt. Min's signature had been moving towards a cliff face. When the drone entered his sector, he did not retreat. He went up. He began to climb the wet rock. It was a difficult, risky climb in the rain. But from the top, he would have a wide view. Jihyun and Taesuk's signatures were close together. When the drone's patrol pattern swept near them, they did not hide separately. Taesuk moved to a large, hollow log. But he did not go inside. He picked up a large stone and banged it loudly against the outside of the log. Bang, bang, bang. The drone immediately changed course and shot towards the sound. It was a direct, aggressive lure. As the drone closed in, Jihyun, who was positioned in a thicket nearby, stood up. She did not run away. She waved her arms and shouted, "Hey, over here!" Then she ducked behind a tree. The drone swerved towards her new movement. It was now moving between 2 points of loud, human-made noise, confused. Sumin's signature had been still for a long time. She had found a spot near a fast-moving stream. The sound of the water covered all other sounds. Kale watched as her signature moved, not away from the gulch, but in a wide circle. She was gathering materials. A long, straight fallen branch. Vines. While the drone was distracted by Taesuk and Jihyun, Sumin worked quickly. She used a sharp stone to point the end of the branch. She used the vines to tie the stone tighter. She did not make a spear to throw. She wedged the pointed end into a crack between two rocks at the mouth of a narrow game trail, angling it up. Then she took more vines and, with swift, practiced knots, made a loose loop on the ground, connecting it to a bent-over sapling. It was a simple snare. She was not building a weapon to attack. She was building a trap to stop. On the cliff, Min saw it all. He saw the drone's pattern. He saw his friends confusing it. He saw Sumin setting her trap. He used his high position. He whistled, a sharp, carrying sound. The drone turned towards the whistle. Min ducked behind a rock. The drone shot forward, following the direction of the sound. The path led it directly towards the narrow game trail. Kale leaned forward, their screen glowing in the dim light. This was not evasion. This was a coordinated engagement. The drone sped down the trail. Its sensors were fixed on the last known location of the whistle. It did not see the vine snare until it was too late. The loop closed around one of its forward limbs. The bent sapling snapped upright, yanking the drone off course. It slammed into the wall of the trail, right onto the pointed stick Sumin had placed. There was a crunch of simulated chitin, a spark of electricity. The drone's blue signature on Kale's screen flickered, then went dark. A large red disabled alert flashed. The forest was suddenly quiet, save for the rain. The humans emerged from their positions. They gathered around the broken drone. Min climbed down from his cliff. Tae-suk and Ji-hyun came out of hiding. Sumin stood by her trap, looking at her work. They did not cheer. They did not look relieved. They looked like mechanics inspecting a broken machine. Min poked the drone with a stick. "The targeting sensor seems vulnerable from above," he said. "Luring it worked," Ji-hyun said. "It prioritizes sudden movement and noise over stealth. It followed the predicted path once a clear audio target was established," Tae-suk noted, tapping his wrist comp. Sumin just pointed at the snare. "The vines here are strong. Good material." Kale arrived a few minutes later. The other trainees slowly came out of hiding, seeing the danger was over. They looked at the destroyed drone, then at the humans, with a mixture of awe and new fear. Kale looked at the scene, the smashed drone, the simple, effective trap, the humans standing around it discussing tactics. They had not just avoided the predator. They had analyzed its behavior, distracted it, led it, and broken it. They had not acted out of fear. They had acted like a team of engineers solving a faulty system. "You were supposed to evade it," Kale said, their voice flat. Min looked up. "We did, Instructor. It can't tag us if it's broken." Kale stared at him. The logic was undeniable, but it was entirely wrong. It was like saying you avoided a fire by removing the concept of heat. "You used aggression. You used a weapon," Kale stated, pointing at the sharpened stick. "It was a pointed stick," Ji-hyun said. "It was already here. We just moved it." "You took a terrible risk," Kale said. Tae-suk frowned. "The risk calculation changed when we realized we could predict its path. A controlled risk became more efficient than indefinite hiding in the rain." Kale had no answer. The lesson had been fear. The humans had learned something else. They had learned the drone's rules, and then they had changed the game. As Kale called for the group to return to camp, they walked behind the humans. The other trainees gave the humans a wide space. The humans did not seem to notice. They were talking quietly about the tensile strength of the local vines. That night, Kale did not write in the official log. They sat in their shelter, thinking. The puzzle was now a problem. The gap was not in understanding. It was in fundamental instinct. What did you do with a student who, when shown a predator, did not learn to fear it but instead started taking notes on how to take it apart? Kale did not know. But for the first time, a very quiet, very cold feeling settled in Kale's stomach. It was not fear. It was the beginning of dread. The next day was for rest and study. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and heavy. Instructor Kale sent the trainees to review survival manuals on their wrist comps. But Kale could not rest. The image of the broken drone would not leave their mind. It was a training tool, not a real enemy. But the human response felt real. It felt like a key turning in a lock, revealing a door Kale was not sure they wanted to open. Kale retreated to the small instructor's pod. The soft hum of its systems was a familiar comfort. They needed to understand. The official Galactic Coalition file on Homo sapiens was not enough. It was a list of facts: bipedal, omnivorous, social, planet, Earth, Class 7 biosphere. Achievements: notable for rapid technological advancement and complex, often contradictory, social structures. It said nothing about sharpened sticks and coordinated lures. Kale bypassed the main file. They dug deeper into the sublinks, the anthropological annexes, the ecological impact reports. The data was dry and technical, but patterns started to emerge. Kale's eyes, which did not blink like human eyes, scanned line after line. Ice Age megafauna. The file showed images of ancient Earth creatures reconstructed from bones. Giant cats with long teeth. Woolly beasts with horns the size of trees. Bears that stood taller than two humans. The notes were brief. Many species driven to extinction circa 10,000 to 50,000 years ago by a combination of climate shift and human activity. Human activity. Not a natural disaster. Not a super predator. Human activity. Kale searched for human predators. The list was short. On land, for adult humans, it was nearly empty in most regions. A few big cats. Some large bears. The files noted these encounters were statistically rare and often resulted from provocation or territory conflict. The language was careful. It did not say humans were hunted. It said they sometimes had conflicts with other large animals. Then Kale found a term: persistence predation. A brief video clip played. It showed a group of ancient humans on a dry, grassy plain. They were not fast. They were not strong like the antelope they were following. But they kept following. Under the hot sun, for hours. The antelope would sprint away, then stop to rest. The humans kept walking, then jogging, then walking. Their pace was steady, relentless. They did not need to be faster than the antelope. They just needed to be more patient. In the end, the antelope, exhausted and overheated, could not run anymore. The humans approached. It was not a dramatic chase. It was a slow, inevitable conclusion. Kale felt a chill. This was not the explosive ambush of a Gravix. This was something else. It was a predatory style based on endurance, on tracking, on outlasting. It was cruel in a quiet way. More terms emerged. Apex predator myopia. It was a theoretical note from a xenopsychologist. A species that occupies the apex predator niche for a significant evolutionary period may develop a cognitive blind spot. They may not instinctively recognize other creatures as predators in the classical sense. They may process them as competitors or threats to be managed, rather than as existential hunters to be fled from. The core survival drive shifts from avoid being eaten to maintain environmental dominance. Maintain environmental dominance. The words seemed to glow on the screen. Kale thought of Min climbing the cliff for a better view. Not to hide, but to see. To dominate the visual field. They thought of Jihyun and Taesuk making themselves the loudest thing in the forest to control the drone's movement. They thought of Sumin's trap. Not a panic response. A territorial one. A way to clear a nuisance from a path. Kale leaned back. The soft hum of the pod felt different now. Felt like the quiet before a storm. The humans did not fear the predator drone because, in their deepest minds, they did not see a predator. They saw an animal in their way. An animal that could be studied, tricked, tired out, and broken. The same way their ancestors had looked at a giant, tired antelope. But the drone was just a machine. What about a real creature? A living, breathing hunter from another world? Would the same cold logic apply? Kale accessed the mission parameters for the final exercise. It involved the terror scale, a large native reptile. It was classified as a defensive territorial predator. It was not a casual hunter. But if threatened, or if its nesting grounds were entered, it would attack. It used a powerful sonic blast and a psychic fear pulse to stun and disorient intruders before driving them away. The goal of the exercise was to detect its territory, recognize the signs, and retreat safely. It was the ultimate test of the fear principle. Know what you cannot fight and run. Looking at the data on the terror scale, Kale felt a knot of worry tighten. The humans had just dismantled a simulation by refusing to play its game. What would they do when faced with a real, living example of galactic danger? Would the fear pulse finally trigger the correct, survival-based terror? Or would they see just another competitor? Another problem to solve? Kale closed the files. The quiet of the pod was complete. For the first time, Kale was not just concerned about the human survival. A darker thought was forming. The coalition had accepted humans for their adaptability, their teamwork, their intelligence. They saw a talented, if odd, new species. But what if they had miscategorized them entirely? What if, in bringing humans into the stars, they had not welcomed a fellow prey species learning to hide better? What if they had accidentally given a new type of predator the keys to a much, much bigger forest? Kale looked out the viewport at the trainees sitting in a clearing. The Talunians were sharing food gently. The Gron were basking in a sunbeam. The humans were talking, Min drawing something in the dirt with a stick, the others watching and adding marks. They were planning something. They were always planning. Kale's earlier notes now seemed foolish. Deficient threat response. That was wrong. Their threat response was not deficient. It was simply different. It was not about responding to a threat. It was about neutralizing it. The instructor realized, with a slow and heavy certainty, that the final exercise would not be a test for the humans. It would be a test for Kale. A test to see if they could understand what they were teaching before it was too late. The dread in Kale's stomach was no longer quiet. It had found its voice. The air in the deep forest was still and thick. The final exercise had begun. Instructor Kale led the trainees into a part of Sylvan Prime where the trees were ancient and twisted, their trunks covered in layers of soft, gray moss. The light was a permanent twilight. Your goal is simple, Kale said, their voice low in the quiet. Navigate through this valley to the marked extraction point. The path is clear. The danger is not on the path. It is around it. This is the nesting ground of the terror scale. Kale showed them an image on a datapad. It was a bulky reptile, covered in bony plates, with a wide, sound-gathering crest on its head. It is not a hunter, but it is a defender. Its territory is its nest. If you enter it, it will give one warning. A psychic pulse of fear. If you do not retreat, it will use a sonic blast to stun you, then drive you away with physical force. Do not fight. Do not challenge. Your only task is to recognize the boundary and go around. Fear is your guide. It will tell you that you have gone too far. Listen to it. The trainees nodded, their faces serious. The humans listened with focused attention. Kale looked at them, hoping to see a flicker of the proper understanding in their eyes. Min was studying the image of the creature. Jihyun was looking at the terrain map. Kale could not read them. Stay together. Move quietly. Use your sensors to watch for biosigns. Go. The group started down the narrow, rocky path that wound between great mossy mounds. The silence was heavy. It was the silence of a place where small animals knew to be quiet. The Talunians trembled with every step. The Gron moved with exaggerated care. The humans moved differently. They were not trembling. They were scanning. Min looked at the moss on the trees. See here, he whispered to Jihyun, pointing. Scrapes. Low on the trunks. Something wide brushes passed here regularly. Jihyun nodded, pointing to the ground. The path is clear of debris, but the soil is compressed off to the left. There is a regular side route. They were not looking for a place to hide. They were tracking. Kale followed from a distance, a monitor in hand showing the life signs of the trainees and the approximate nesting zone of the terror scale. The group was skirting the edge of the red-shaded area on the map. Then it happened. Sumin, who was on the left flank, stepped off the path to examine a strange, fungus-covered stone. She took 2 steps into a particularly soft patch of moss. The warning came instantly. It was not a sound first. It was a feeling. A wave of cold, mind-numbing dread washed over the group. It was the fear of being small, of being seen, of being food. It was a primal scream inside the skull. The Talunians dropped to the ground, covering their heads. One of the Gran let out a choked whimper and froze, muscles locked. The other trainees recoiled, their eyes wide with pure terror. The fear pulse did its job perfectly. It identified prey. Kale watched the human vitals on the monitor. Their heart rates spiked. Their breathing quickened. But the pattern was wrong. It was not the flat line of paralyzing fear. It was the jagged peak of sudden, intense stress. Then the sound came. A deep, cracking thump followed by a high-pitched shriek that seemed to vibrate the bones in Kale's own body. The sonic blast. It hit the group like a physical wall. Sumin, who had triggered it, was thrown back onto the path. She landed hard, her ears ringing, a trickle of blood coming from her nose. Min was knocked to his knees, clutching his head. Jihyun stumbled against Tae-suk, who was blinking rapidly, trying to clear his vision. The terror scale emerged from behind a giant mound. It was bigger than the image, a living mass of muscle and plate. Its crest was flared, its mouth open in a silent roar of threat. It moved forward, not to bite, but to chase, to trample, to make the intruders gone. Kale raised their voice, the instructor protocol taking over. Fall back. Full retreat. Now! The other trainees, driven by pure instinct, scrambled to obey. They turned and ran back down the path, away from the creature. The humans did not run. Min shook his head, wiping blood from his lip. He looked at the terror scale, then at Sumin on the ground. His face was not fear. It was anger. It got Sumin! He yelled, his voice rough. Jihyun, one hand on her head, looked at the creature's path. It was moving between them and their fallen teammate. It's not attacking to eat. It's hurting, she shouted back. Tae-suk, his eyes watering from the sonic blast, pointed a shaky finger. Look, behind it. The nest is in that mound. It's not chasing us far. It's creating a safe zone. Kale stared, unable to move. This was not in the lesson plan. The terror scale roared again and took another thunderous step forward. It was now squarely on the path, cutting off the humans from the retreating group and from Sumin. Min looked at Jihyun and Tae-suk. No words were needed. A terrible, calm understanding passed between them. They were not looking at a monster. They were looking at a large, angry animal guarding its home. And it had hurt one of theirs. Flank it, Min growled. Draw its attention. He did not run away. He ran sideways, off the path, waving his arms and shouting. Hey, over here. Look at me. The terror scale turned its massive head towards the new movement and the loud noise. It was confused. Prey was supposed to run away. As it focused on Min, Jihyun moved the other way, staying low. She grabbed two rocks and banged them together. Clack, clack, clack. The creature's head swiveled again, its crest pulsing. It took a step towards Jihyun, then back towards Min. It was being pulled in two directions. Tae-suk did not make noise. He moved to Sumin, who was trying to sit up. He pulled her arm over his shoulder. Can you walk? He asked quickly. Yes, she gasped, her voice shaky but clear. On the monitor, Kale saw it all. The humans were not fleeing. They were executing a maneuver. They were using the creature's own instincts against it, just like they had with the drone. They were controlling the battlefield. The terror scale, frustrated, decided to remove the closest nuisance. It turned fully towards Min, who was now near a thick cluster of trees. It lowered its head, gathering itself for a charge that would trample him. Kale's hand went to the emergency stunner on their belt. But it was too far. This was going to be a disaster. Then, from the ground, Sumin saw it. She saw the creature's focus, its weight shifting. She saw Min's position. And she saw the loose, heavy stones on the slope above the path, where Tae-suk had pulled her from. She pointed, her voice a sharp command. The cliff! Above it! Min followed her gaze. He saw the stones. He understood. He still had the signal launcher on his belt, the one for emergencies, to shoot a bright flare into the sky. He did not shoot it into the sky. As the terror scale charged, Min yanked the launcher free, aimed not at the creature, but at the base of the stone slope above it, and fired. The concussive pop of the flare was followed by a sharper crack. The bright light and shock hit the loosely packed stones and earth. A small section of the slope gave way. Not a huge landslide. A controlled tumble of rocks and dirt that poured down directly between the charging terror scale and Min. The creature skidded to a halt as debris rained down in front of it, creating a noisy, dusty barrier. It roared in frustration and surprise, but the direct path was blocked. In that moment, Min scrambled back. Jihyun was already moving down the path. Tae-suk had Su-min on her feet. The four humans, together now, did not run in panic. They moved quickly and in order back down the path, putting distance between themselves and the confused, now-blocked creature. They reached Kale's position, their faces smudged with dirt and blood, their breathing heavy from effort, not terror. Behind them, the terror scale, faced with a sudden earthfall and no clear target, snorted and began to retreat back to its mound, its defensive duty done. The forest was quiet again. The other trainees were huddled farther down the path, staring at the humans as they returned. Kale looked at them, at Min, who had used a distress tool as a geological weapon, at Jihyun and Tae-suk, who had split a predator's attention like police directing traffic, at Su-min, bleeding but analyzing the terrain for a weakness. They had not feared the predator. They had assessed it, engaged it, and outmaneuvered it. They had treated a Class 7 defensive terror like a logistical obstruction. The lesson was over, and Kale had failed to teach them a single thing. The silence in the debriefing room was heavier than the forests. The trainees sat on simple benches. The Talunians were still shaking. The Gron had their heads low. The humans sat together. Min had a clean cloth held to his lip. Sumin's nose was plugged with gentle clotting gel. They looked tired, but their eyes were alert, moving between Kale and the coalition officers on the wall screen. The officers were pleased. Their voices came through the speaker, smooth and positive. "Instructor Kale," the lead officer said, a Voxian like Kale. "The exercise data shows a remarkable outcome. All trainees survived. The territorial specimen was unharmed and returned to its nest. And the human trainees displayed exceptional situational problem-solving." Kale stood stiffly, not looking at the screen. "They deviated from the core lesson. Adaptation is a core lesson of survival," another officer chimed in. "They used non-lethal means to create a barrier and enable a safe retreat. This shows advanced teamwork and cognitive flexibility." On the screen, data streams flowed. They highlighted the human heart rates, their vocal coordination, their use of tools. It was all reduced to numbers and green, positive indicators. They saw a successful experiment. Kale saw a terrifying truth. The lesson was to recognize a superior threat and retreat, Kale said, their voice flat. Not to engage it. But they did retreat, the first officer noted, just in a more active manner. Their method resulted in 0 further injuries after the initial sonic blast. Frankly, it was more efficient than a panicked flight that could have led to falls or scattering. The humans listened. Min's eyebrows were slightly raised. Jihyun looked at Kale, then at the floor. They could hear the disconnect. The officers saw a good test score. Kale saw a fundamental failure of understanding. "Permission to speak?" Min asked. "Granted," the lead officer said. Min stood. The creature, the terror scale, it was not trying to hunt us. It was defending its home. Once we understood that, the goal changed from run from a monster to leave its territory without further injury. The fastest way to do that was to discourage its advance. We used noise and movement to redirect its focus, and then a minor rockfall to create a physical boundary it would not cross. It was a solution to a different problem than the one we were given. The officers on the screen were silent for a moment. "An elegant analysis of animal behavior," one finally said. "This confirms high pattern recognition." Excellent. Kale felt something inside them go cold. Elegant analysis. They were praising the diagnosis while missing the disease. The humans had not just analyzed the animal. They had, in those moments, become the more complex animal in the encounter. They had not submitted to the natural order of predator and prey. They had rewritten it for their own purposes. The meeting ended with praise for the cohort, especially the humans. The officers logged it as a successful proof of concept for integrating human tactical thinking into standard protocols. The screen went dark. The other trainees filed out slowly, throwing glances at the humans. Looks that were no longer just curious, but held a new, deep wariness. The humans had not acted like prey. They had acted like something the other trainees had no category for. Finally, only Kale and the 4 humans remained in the quiet room. Kale turned to face them. The professional calm was gone. In its place was a raw, urgent need to understand. "Sit," Kale said, not as an instructor, but as someone lost. The humans sat. Kale looked at their faces, the cuts, the calm eyes. "Your people," Kale began, the words feeling clumsy. "What do you fear?" The humans looked at each other. It was not a question they had expected. Min spoke first slowly. "I fear a hull breach on a deep space freighter. The sound of metal groaning. The silence of vacuum waiting." Jihyun added, her voice soft. "I fear a call that doesn't connect when someone you love is in danger. The not knowing. The helplessness." Tae-suk adjusted his glasses. "I fear a system failure with no backup. A cascade error with no solution. The logic problem that cannot be solved." Sumin was last. She touched her injured nose. "I fear the quiet in the woods when all the birds stop singing. Not because of a predator, but because something is wrong. Something you cannot see." Kale listened, their minds struggling to fit these answers into a framework. These were not fears of teeth and claws. They were not fears of a specific hunter. They were abstract, cosmic. They feared isolation. They feared chaos. They feared the uncaring universe itself. "You do not fear the terror scale," Kale stated, not as a question. "It was big and loud," Min said. "It was a problem. We were in its way and it was in ours. Problems can be solved." "It hurts Su-min," Jihyun said, and there was a flash of something hard in her eyes. "That made it a priority." "You felt its fear pulse," Kale pressed. "The sonic blast. Your bodies reacted. Your nose bled. But you did not feel fear." Tae-suk considered this. "We felt pain. We felt disorientation. We felt a very strong warning. Fear is what you feel when you think there is no answer. We always thought there was an answer. We just had to find it." Kale finally understood. The missing piece clicked into place, and the picture it made was chilling. The fear pulse was designed to trigger a prey animal's ultimate response. The certainty of death, the end of options. It told every other species in the galaxy, "You have no answer. Run." It did not work on humans because, deep in their bones, they did not believe that. A million years of being the problem solver, the tool user, the persistent predator, had bred it out of them. They approached the universe with a default assumption. There is always an answer. I just have to find it, even when facing a roaring monster from another world. The creature in the forest was just another thing in the dark. And humans, for all their history, had spent their time learning how to light fires, build walls, and make tools to push the dark back. Kale looked at the 4 of them, sitting patiently, waiting for the lesson to continue. They were not monsters. They were not cruel. They were helpful and smart and brave. And that was the most frightening thing of all. They would help a friend, solve a puzzle, and break a predator's will with the same quiet determination. They would do it without ever feeling the one emotion that kept the galaxy's balance in check. Kale's earlier dread solidified into a sharp, cold knowledge. The instructor's log entry wrote itself in their mind, clear and final. "We didn't recruit survivors. We recruited rivals." "Thank you," Kale said, the words hollow. "The debriefing is over." The humans stood and left the room, talking softly about getting some real food. Kale remained, staring at the empty space where they had been. The training was finished. But for Kale, the real work was just beginning. They had to make the coalition understand what they had brought into the fold. Not prey that needed to learn fear, but a species that had forgotten it, and in doing so had become something the galaxy was not prepared for. The shuttle bay of the orbital station was clean and bright, a sharp contrast to the muddy greens and grays of Sylvan Prime. The trainees stood in a group with their small packs, waiting for their assignments. The mood was different now. The other species did not stand close to the humans. A small space just a step or two had opened up around them. It was not hostility. It was caution, the same caution you would show around a powerful, unfamiliar piece of machinery. Instructor Kale walked down the line, handing out final evaluations. They were short notes. For the Talunians, shows strong instinct for threat avoidance. For the Gron, displays commendable herd cohesion under stress. They stopped in front of the humans. Min, Jihyun, Taesuk, Sumin. Their faces were calm, expectant. Kale looked at them, and for a moment, saw not 4 individuals, but the shadow of their whole world. A world of persistent, problem-solving apes who had looked at the dark and decided to invent the flashlight. Kale handed them their datapads. The official evaluation was glowing. It praised their adaptability, teamwork, and innovative tactical application. Min read it and gave a small, polite nod. "Thank you, instructor." Kale did not move. The hum of the station's life support filled the silence. The other trainees were already beginning to say quiet goodbyes, moving toward their respective transport gates. "There is no note here," Kale said softly, so only the humans could hear. "About the most important thing you did." Jihyun looked up. "What did we do?" "You changed the equation," Kale said. "You did not play the game you were given. You made a new game. You saw a predator and you did not see a master. You saw a piece on a board that could be moved." Taesuk frowned slightly. "We just did what worked." "That is the point," Kale said. "Your definition of what works is different. It does not include surrender. It does not include accepting that something is too powerful to engage. You will engage anything. You will just change how you engage." Sumin watched Kale's face. "This is a bad thing?" Kale looked away, toward the viewport showing the swirling blue and green of the planet below. "I do not know. For you, perhaps not. For the galaxy." Kale paused. "The galaxy has rules. Ancient rules. Predator. Prey. Fear keeps the balance. It tells the grass-eater to run, so it does not get eaten all at once. It tells the hunter to be careful, because a wounded prey can fight back. Fear is the language everything understands." They turned back to the humans. "You do not speak that language. You speak the language of tools and plans and stubbornness. When you meet a new creature, you will not feel its place in the order. You will only see its strengths and weaknesses, and you will start to think of how to use one against the other. Not because you are evil, but because it is your nature. You are builders, and sometimes to build you must first clear the land." Min's expression was serious now. He understood the weight of the words. "You are saying we are a danger." "I am saying you are a variable," Kale corrected. "A new, unknown math. The coalition wanted survivors. They saw your history of disasters and your persistence. They thought, these creatures are tough. They can hide well. They did not understand that you do not hide. You persist. And when something tries to make you hide, you get creative." The station announcement echoed. A transport was ready for the human cohort, heading to a logistics and engineering depot. Their skills, the official report said, were best suited for technical problem-solving. The humans picked up their packs. The moment was over. As they walked toward the gate, Kale spoke one last time, not as their instructor, but as the first of many who would have to learn. "What will you do when you meet a species that does not just roar, but thinks? That also makes plans?" Min stopped and looked back. The others paused with him. He thought about the question, about the uncaring void, about hull breaches and silent phones. "Then we will talk," he said simply. "If we can. And if we cannot." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The alternative was in their eyes. It was not rage. It was resolve. The same resolve that looked at a charging terror scale and saw a rockfall as the answer. They turned and walked through the gate, joining the orderly flow of beings in the station. Kale stood alone as the bay emptied. The lesson of Sylvan Prime was complete, and Kale had learned the most. The humans were not broken. They were not wrong. They were just different in a way that changed everything around them. The true challenge ahead was not for humanity. It was for everyone else. Could the galaxy learn to live with a species that saw a predator not as a thing to fear, but as a circumstance to overcome? Could treaties and borders and understandings be built with a people whose first instinct was not to submit, but to solve? Kale walked slowly to the observation deck. Far below, Sylvan Prime turned, its forests hiding ancient rules of tooth and claw. Up here, in the sterile silence of space, a new rule had been written. It was not written in fear. It was written in the quiet, unblinking determination of a species that had tamed its own world and now looked out at the stars, not in terror, but with a thoughtful, appraising gaze. The instructor's work was done. The diplomat's work was about to begin. And Kale knew, with a cold certainty, that the galaxy would never be the same. It had just met humanity. And humanity, it seemed, did not fear predators. They just hadn't decided what to do with them yet.